Hello everybody and welcome back to BEERANID 40K as we continue our series on the Art of Warhammer, the sequel to the Strengths video, Understanding Your Strengths. Today's video, part of understanding your strengths that we're going to talk about, is asking a simple question. What can you do that others can't? If there's something that your army can do that others can't, that's an advantage or a niche that must be utilized to its fullest potential. Well, why is that? History is full of examples of one-sided slaughters that became possible because an enemy had a technology or an advantage that another side did not. The Viking ships gave them superiority. The atomic bomb gave the US superiority. Firearms and horses gave the Spanish colonists superiority. The list goes on and on. The first place to look is your index or your codex for anything that makes you different and unique. What can your army do that other armies can't? If you identify anything that fits this description, you need to experiment and at least look at building a list around that. A perfect example of this in practice can be seen with my Genestealer cult lists. Pure strain Genestealers in the cult get buffed for having a certain number in a squad. So I make sure to have that many, and even more than that because they're going to need to survive Overwatch before getting into combat. They're also part of an army that now, thanks to the big FAQ, has the best deep striking in the game. So what is my list going to focus on? That. It's going to be a lot of Genestealers and a lot of deep striking. In fact, I'm rebuilding my lists now to get more Genestealers in there and more deep striking, adding some things to it, and you'll be able to see that in practice. So stay tuned for that if you're interested. I'm doing this because right now the big FAQ has changed the face of deep striking significantly. And if you're one of the few armies that can deep strike turn 1 now, you need to be using that. But deep striking isn't the only thing I'm talking about here. If you have a stat, if you have a stratagem, if you have a special rule, it gives your army something somebody does not. Maybe better shooting than somebody else or other armies. You need to use that. Every army has something, a strength, that an enemy usually doesn't. Some armies get a bonus to a save, for example, for being a certain distance away. And if you play Raven Guard or Alpha Legion, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about, where basically, just because of who you are, you get a bonus to your save, a minus to hit for the enemy that comes for free in your armies, as long as you stay a certain distance away. Now, because of this, it would be very wasteful to throw that away and decide, oh, I'm going to do a close combat heavy list. This is what I'm talking about. And in more general terms, armies get stratagems that buff maybe a group of some units, but ignore others. And if that's the case, you should be using more of those buffable units and leaving the others at home, so that the points that you are spending are doing the most for you, are being the most effective they can be, with the things that maybe you're not actually paying points for. So this might seem like common sense, but not a lot of people come into 40K knowing how to make lists. And any forum or Facebook group is full of examples of this. They'll say, oh, I have a match coming up. It's this many points. This is what I play. What should I bring? Well, in 40K, we have what can be a very expensive hobby. And too often, a newbie will pay hundreds of dollars and invest a lot of time painting and building as well, only to end up with a subpar list that loses because the way GW makes it seem like the army should work is not always the best way to play. So once you've started evaluating and understanding your strengths, things get interesting. The time will come to make a big decision now. Do you compensate for weaknesses? Or do you ignore them and maximize your strengths further? Now, this is an interesting thought, and it's one that a lot of players, new and experienced, don't always think about. A lot of veterans understand the concept of things like anti-air, anti-monstrous creatures, and in the past editions this was necessary. But we don't have infinity points to spend. Putting points and resources into specific defense takes away points from something else. So now that we're a year into 8th edition, the fact is anything can technically hurt anything, even if they're not a dedicated specialist to hurt that monstrous creature or that flyer. And as the saying goes, there are too many dirty tricks to have a counter for every tactic. I want you to think about that for a minute. What do I mean? There are too many dirty tricks to have a defense for every tactic. Well, imagine you're fighting an army that deep strikes. If your army, which is normally a rapid assault army, stays back to protect your deployment zone at all costs and deny me that alpha strike, well, you're now playing the opponent's game. Yes, you can deny that alpha strike and offset that game plan a bit, but in doing that, your turtled up army also isn't taking control of objectives or moving towards your own game plan. So simply put, every miracle has a price. So the question then becomes, do you meet the enemy in an attempt to deny their dirty tricks? Or do you push on anyway, in a sense ignoring or disregarding an enemy strategy and strength in favor of a superior strategy of your own design? The answer will be up to you, and it will be different in each situation, with each army and against each opponent. But it is something to think about, which hasn't really been talked about in 40K videos and blogs so far. So I leave you with that. Until next time, I hope you found it interesting. This is BEERANID 40K signing off.